Is this sustainable battery more costly?
So you need to know where are the biggest levers.
Do you have all the information from the cell manufacturers in the structured manner that you can work with? Thank you very much for taking your time here at the Advanced Battery Power Conference in Aachen
My
to talk
pleasure.
about,
Thanks for having me.
yeah, you're welcome, to talk about sustainable batteries and in this case, sustainable battery systems and an LCA. But before we jump into today's topic, I want to understand how you found into the field of battery innovation.
So, back when I did my studies in chemistry,
Mm-hmm.
batteries used to be not such a hot topic as today, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So, I still did my PhD on how to get nitrogen oxides out of diesel exhausts.
Okay.
And it was just after that that I started doing two things in parallel. That was co founding my own startup
Oh, okay.
and taking on a postdoc position at the brand new chair of technical electrochemistry at the TU Munich.
Okay.
And that's actually how I found into battery research,
Mm-hmm.
and was pretty quickly pretty thrilled by it. And as this was 2011, we started out with some funding on doing lithium air research, which
Okay.
was the hot topic of the day. And
Those batteries are in like ear, how do you call them? Ear monitors, right? Those lithium air batteries.
there are some primary batteries
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
running on
primary
lithium
lithium
air.
air.
So
Yeah.
the aim back then was to get a secondary battery
Okay, gotcha.
out of that, which later on proved to be, let's say, at best far away. And so, but those were the first steps. And then
Mhm.
actually shifting to lithium sulfur, which I think is still a pretty interesting long term perspective.
Mhm.
And later on, when that turned out to be more of a long term perspective, switching to lithium ion.
Mhm.
And there I focused on cathode active material characterization, nickel rich NMCs. So a lot of the technology that we see now in a maturity stage ready for series automotive applications.
Or even in series
Yes,
application, right?
right.
Okay, and so then at some point you started at Webasto and are dealing now with LCA and sustainability aspects of battery systems. So can you explain Webasto's role in this regard?
Yes, so I started at Webasto in 2018.
Okay.
Um, Back then, Webasto Batteries was still about 40 people or so.
Mhm.
So over time, of course, it has tremendously grown. And I started out as being a cell expert, as naturally out of my research topic, I came from cell technology. At
Mhm.
the time, I didn't know much about how to build a battery system based on that.
Yes.
So that's what I learned at Webasto. And of course, for Webasto, the cell is a set part mostly. Um, but still, it is defining the entire battery system around it, the entire requirements on thermal management and so on.
Mhm.
Um, so even if it's a set part, you need some people in the company who have a very good knowledge about that specific part.
Okay, and that's where you
And
entered.
that was my job in the beginning. And then, of course, as we grew bigger, it was clear that we actually needed a team for that, dedicated to that,
Mhm.
and also to do the actual system integration of battery cells, to
Mhm.
do all this engineering. And so then I switched my responsibilities a little bit from doing the expert role for myself to actually teaching and empowering others to do this job.
Mhm.
So that's why now I'm responsible for the R&D team for battery cell integration.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's what I do now.
Nice. And now we come to the advanced battery power and your keynote. So, can you explain briefly what the current work with the LCA analysis is about and what you find out? I think we have 2 points to cover on sustainability and knowledge. And let's start off with sustainability and costs. Is this sustainable battery more costly?
Hopefully not.
Easy answer.
So, because the thing is, of course, the entire battery supply chain, including us as a battery system supplier, is facing enormous cost pressure, and also for a good reason. So, of course, it's difficult to implement sustainability measures which actually create a lot of additional cost. However, most of the sustainability measures, once you dive into it, actually help to save material, save factory footprint by doing lean designs for also lean production processes. And so in the long run, those sustainability measures can actually save cost. And then, so in that ideal case, both goes hand in hand, and it's a win-win situation.
What would be a practical example to just visualize the cost-saving potential while addressing sustainability? Do you have any example that you can showcase to us?
So, for example, take the initial battery design. Like, most of the actual environmental impact of a battery is kind of predetermined in the design phase. And so when you go from a highly modular concept with lots of small modules, lots of assembly steps, to a higher integration level of the whole battery system, like, let's say, fewer bigger modules or even cell-to-pack approaches or so, you might lose some flexibility on the way, but you can save on the number of production steps which is necessary. You can do with less parts, and thereby that's where you start to save resources, and that's where you start to save factory footprint. That's where you start to save energy consumption during production, all of those things.
Okay, gotcha. And you mentioned a second part or a second point, a critical factor, and I think that's knowledge, to build up an LCA which can help to make better decisions, correct?
Yes. Because, of course, to say, hey, let's save carbon footprint also, of course, it's honorable to do that. But in order to choose the most efficient measures that you can take, so you need to know where are the biggest levers, and you need to know where are the levers which are quite big, but actually a comparably small effort to change. And so you need knowledge about this. And that's where LCA actually kicks in to help us, because we can...
to take out the intuition a little bit, because I think before we switched on the cameras, we talked about aluminum and sourcing aluminum, for example, for cell housing, right?
Right.
And you would intuitively, and I think this is what you explained to me, to do it to source from your neighbor, so to speak, like from a company nearby. But I think the approach you are looking at is doing it more rationally, right? That you emphasize. Can you explain that?
Exactly. Of course, sourcing near to our production plants and near to our customers also is beneficial in terms of transport. However, one also has to consider that the aluminium is mostly made with the regional energy mix from where it's made. So, for example, Canadian aluminium usually comes at about 1/3 of the carbon footprint of aluminium produced in China. And so one has to consider that to kind of choose the best overall package and carbon footprint that you can get from production, transportation, and finally creation of your parts.
Can you say which are the biggest levers to pull? Just some examples, like from the knowledge point of view, what one might not think about. I think transportation, of course, it's counterintuitive to have it shipped over the Atlantic, for example. Okay, if you compare it to China, obviously there's no, or it's even worse in terms of transportation, but nevertheless, it's still a transportation factor. And do you have an example that really sticks out, or are there multiple factors that are all adding into the equation?
So, of course, again, coming from a battery systems point of view, biggest lever is the cell, as it creates about 70% of the carbon footprint of a battery system, and also most of the resource depletion potential toxicity, and so on and so forth.
It's all caused by the cell.
So that's also why also in LCA considerations and sustainability considerations, the battery cell where I'm initially coming from is such an important lever to pull.
But isn't it extremely important then to have the battery passport and everything that's in the battery regulation to be rolled out globally? Because I
sure.
think this provides a basis, a knowledge base that we then can work with to make sound decisions. Or?
Exactly, because well, as I said, the prerequisite for any efficient sustainability measure is knowledge. Where do our emissions come from?
Yeah.
Where do our resources come from? What are the working conditions there? And actually, the battery passport and the new EU batteries regulation in general is setting standards to how transparency has to be achieved. And later on, of course, it also sets limits. And that's a very good guideline, because the entire supply chain has some solid orientation what to do over the next years and what to consider.
Would you say that the battery regulations are more a challenge or potential?
They are both.
Yeah, because right, they offer a potential to build this level playing field, as I like to say. But at the same point, we have to do our homework and to gather all the information, to structure all the information, and to build a knowledge base along the supply chain. You mentioned the cell manufacturer, right? And my practical question to you is, building your LCA, as you will elaborate in your keynote, do you have all the information from the cell manufacturers in the structured manner that you can work with?
So let me quickly then get back to the challenge versus potential.
Yeah.
Because on short term, of course, it's at first a challenge, because naturally it requires a lot of additional work and action to be done. In the long run, I think it's really potential, because we are building up knowledge, and if we act on that knowledge, implement the right measures, that's also the way in the long term how we can get both more sustainable but also more competitive, more efficient. And so I'd like to see the potential in that.
Great.
And now coming back to the knowledge base, whether we're getting all the information we need. A few years ago, it was incredibly hard, for example, to get primary data for our components like the cell from the actual manufacturers. And we see that the situation is getting better. So I think both pressure and ambition in the supply chain is rising, and so the situation in getting primary data is getting a lot better.
Okay, that's good.
Of course, there's still a long way to go.
Yeah. So let me ask you now 3 concluding questions. First one is challenges, second potential, and then your call to action. What are the biggest challenges for building a European battery ecosystem?
I think one of the big challenges right now is volatility, and that is both volatility of the market situation, volatility in the global political situation, because as already pointed out, a set of regulations which are reliable basically are a call to action for the entire supply chain, and in the end enable some also some good collaboration on this. And of course, uncertainty here is about the worst thing you can have. And so that's for me, it's actually one of the biggest challenges.
And what would be a solution for this, and with this a potential for our industry?
Well, so I think the biggest potential we have, especially when it comes to building up a European battery ecosystem covering the entire supply chain, is collaboration. Because we do have a lot of knowledge and a lot of process steps which are required to make a battery in the end. And this knowledge, of course, rarely lies in a single company, but the whole supply chain has to be working closely together to get a good and efficient product in the end. And so that's key.
Okay, I'm with you. And this is also why the slogan "Immobilizing for the Better Together." I mean, it indirectly includes the term collaboration. That's how I see it as well. That's why I'm on this mission on visiting all the important players in our field in Europe to connect the competences. So, and I'm of course looking forward to visiting you at Webasto and showcasing also the innovation you have to offer, as you briefly explained in this conversation. So, thank you, Hans, for the talk, and looking forward to the next one.
Thanks a lot for having me. And yeah, I wish you all the best for your endeavors. And yeah, happy to welcome you anytime at Webasto.
Thank you.